here. Thank you so much for having me. You've heard about Headman's Coat, but I would say the reason why I'm probably here is when I made it on CNN, when I completed something called the Krispy Kreme Challenge. Has anyone here ever heard of it or done it before? Have you done it?
No, I would never do it.
You would never do it? Yeah, have you done it?
I did it before. It was called the Krispy Kreme Challenge.
What was it called?
We just did it. We were at NC State. We run down P Street.
Eat a dozen glazed and call it a day. It was your own challenge. I love it. Well, a few things you should know about me. I live right here in Raleigh, North Carolina, but as Emily was saying, I actually lived in an Airstream trailer for 3 years. We just got back last September. It started as a book tour for Chasing the Bright Side that was only supposed to be 6 months, but then the pandemic hit. We're like, why not stay outside? But it's funny because my husband, he played football at NC State. He's kind of a bigger guy, so anything he did in the Airstream was like straight out of a scene from Elf, if you guys have seen that movie. But we had the best time, saw so many amazing sights all over the country, and it was truly just one of the best experiences, but glad to be back in Raleigh. Another thing you should know about me is I can't cook at all, like Pinterest recipes, all of that is just dreaming for me. Like I'll find a cute little pancake recipe that looks something like this, and I'm like, you know what? I can do this. I can make this pancake for a little Sunday brunch, or for Easter. It seems simple enough. And I follow the directions, I do everything to the best of my ability, and it turns out looking something like this. But I can relate a lot to this pancake, because on social media, we're all this pancake. We're living our best life, we're, got a promotion at work, everything's going well, but the reality is most of us are here. We're just doing our best, and sometimes things don't work out as planned. But I think this is where we can actually learn from each other, is by telling this pancake version of my story, which I plan to do this afternoon. So my story begins in one of the most magical places on earth, besides the Marriott Crabtree, in Disney World. Is anyone here, any Disney people in here? Okay, so when I was there, I did the Disney College program when I was at NC State, where you go and you work in Disney World for a semester. And so I was a photo pass photographer. So if you've ever been to Disney and those people who are in the safari outfits that are really obnoxious because they want to take your picture all the time, that was me. I loved it. I got to work in Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios, and I got to meet people from all over the world. I got to take pictures of families and just help people plan their trip. But my favorite thing that I got to do when I was working at Disney was I got to photograph kids that were there on their wish through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So if anyone's unfamiliar, Make-A-Wish is an awesome organization. They grant wishes to kids with life-threatening illnesses. And going to Disney World was one of the most popular wishes among Make-A-Wish kids. So I got to be the one that would photograph them when they would meet their favorite princess, or see the castle for the first time, and it was just the coolest and best part of my day to be a small part of theirs, and I just fell in love with just being a part of that process. So I got back to school at NC State my sophomore year, and I applied for an internship at Make-A-Wish. And at the Make-A-Wish offices in Charlotte, where I was from. And that summer, I was interning there, and I was doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work, medical release forms. I was, vacuuming. I was organizing supply closets. I was cold calling people for donations and getting hung up on most of the time. I was licking 1,000 envelopes to mail out. But on paper, it looked like such a tedious summer, but the reality was every single thing I did, no matter how, tedious or boring it might have seemed, I could draw a straight line to helping Make-A-Wish come true. And so I started to have this, revelation, if you will, at 18 years old, where I'm like, maybe our lives and these paths that we choose for ourselves and our careers, maybe it doesn't have to be something where we clock in, clock out, get a paycheck every few weeks. It could be something every day when our alarm goes off. We know that it matters that we're there. We know that our story is serving something bigger than us. And so it was towards the end of this internship, and my supervisor told me that, I had done a good job this summer, and she was going to give me a little bit more responsibility to wrap out the weeks before I went back to school. And so she assigned me a wish child. And so I got to be the coordinator of a girl's wish, and I got to plan everything. And I was so excited. I got her file. Her name's Renee. She was 4 years old. She was so excited to go to Disney World, but specifically, she wanted to go to Disney Sleeping Beauty. She was very clear about the terms of this agreement. And so I met with her and her family. I made, the Disney World plans. I called all of the parks. And made sure that Sleeping Beauty could be there for all of their meals. I made her an appointment at the Bibbidi Boppity Boutique, because that's a thing in Disney World. And then I planned a going away party for her and all of her friends where they, could dress up as their favorite princess. And little by little, this wish started to come together, and it was about a week before she was scheduled to go to Orlando. And she started to have some symptoms flare up, and she wasn't feeling well. And so her parents took her to the hospital, and she had been in this new treatment that they had been trying, and there was something that they had missed. And in that appointment, they realized that the cancer was growing back, and that she wasn't going to be well enough to fly or to drive to Disney World that following week. And so she couldn't go on her wish. And I remember being in the office that day and hearing my boss on the phone with her parents and all of this unfolding, and just thinking to myself, and maybe I'm sure you all have felt this when you heard any kind of jarring news, you're just like, this can't be the story. Because we have these experiences in our life that are tangible life events that we can't control. We can't control how hot it is outside. We can't control if our flight is 12 hours delayed. We can't control if our neighbor's dog is barking at 3 in the morning. We can't control a life-altering diagnosis sometimes. But our experiences are not our story. Our story is how we internalize everything that happens around us and what we do next. So although we might not be able to control our life as if it's a chessboard and know which piece means what and where you can move to achieve something, we can know that everything that happens to us, we have a choice into how we respond and what we do next. So we can't control our experiences, but we can always be the author of our own story. And so I remember being in the office and just thinking, this can't be the story. And I went on to Google and I looked up, local costume shops in Charlotte, North Carolina. And a few hours later, I arrived on her doorstep dressed as Sleeping Beauty and tried to make her wish come true that day. And I brought her this matching dress and a crown that said Princess Renee, and read her the story of Sleeping Beauty, and I spent the whole day with her and her family in character. She totally bought it. And it was one of the clearest before and after moments of my life. And I know all of you here today have a before and after moment. And it's like one day or one call can change absolutely everything for you. The person that I was walking up those steps to her house and ringing the doorbell was a different person walking down them to my car. And sometimes I think when we want to make a change and we want to advocate for something important like lung cancer, sometimes to the outside, you just think about the good. You think about the moment where you can hand over the big fat check and raise $80,000. You think about the survivors and the people that you can help. But what is sometimes uncomfortable but important to remember is that everything good started with something bad. Because hard times give us a choice. They can be the excuse as to why we do less, or they can be the reason as to why we do more. One single experience can write two completely different stories. And that story is up to us. And all of you are sitting here today because you've chosen your hard time as the reason to do more. And your story is the gasoline to that. How you interpret it, how you write it, and how you tell it. One of my favorite analogies is that boiling water can soften a potato, but it can also harden an egg. So when you think about that, sometimes it's not as much about the circumstances as it is about the subject and our own strength and who we are. We can't control everything that happens to us. We can't control our experiences, but we can always write our stories. And that's especially important during the hard times, because if everything was good, then why change? There's no reason to march. There's no reason to pass out flyers for causes you care about. There's no reason to raise dollars. It's when things are tough. That's when advocates are born. That's when philanthropists, entrepreneurs, innovators, progress in medicine, all of that is created because times were hard. And so hard times give us that choice, the excuse to do less or the reason to do more. And I remember after, my experience with Renee, thinking, I want to be able to look back years from now and say, because of her, I was able to do this. And one of the things I noticed was girls like Renee who would start to lose their hair to chemotherapy, they loved to wear headbands after hair loss. So many times the reaction would be to give them a wig or to give them a hat. And sometimes there was an appropriate time and place where they wanted to wear it. But so many times I would see them wearing these colorful, floral, incredible headbands where I realized that they didn't want to hide their experience. They just wanted to restore their self-esteem and feel like a kid again. And so this was like a little spark that just kind of flicked on in the back of my head. Maybe you all have had a spark sometimes where it's, I hate the term aha moment because it makes you believe that all of a sudden one day you're going to have an idea and the clouds are going to part and angels start singing and you're like, aha, this is it. But most of the time when you have an idea, it's just like a match that flicks on in the back of your head. And if you don't pay attention to a match, or if you don't add tinder to it, or if you don't put it in a fire, then it'll just fade. But a match can also be the start of something really big. And so I lit this match of hey, there's this connection between headbands and kids with illnesses. And you start building, you start blowing oxygen onto this fire. And I'm like, yes, it could be this company, it could be this, it could be that. And maybe you've had an idea where you start kind of breathing life into it. It's like a piece of paper that gets caught in the wind. It just starts building and building momentum. But sometimes what happens when an actual piece of paper gets caught in the wind, you run up to it and you stomp on it. And our thoughts can do the exact same thing to our ideas. That piece of paper that gets caught in the wind, we can stomp on it before we even let it take shape, before we even let it build momentum. We think, well, my story's not good enough, or I shouldn't stand up and share, or maybe I'm not the right person to volunteer for this. Our inner dialogue is the quarterback to our future. It controls everything we do next. And when we're talking about how our story can be someone else's survival guide, our inner dialogue is the person who writes it. And so we have to be able to train our inner dialogue to say yes to the life we want and no to the life we don't. That way we can actually serve others. But what's really interesting to me is that most of our thoughts are actually born out of repetition, not truth. So many times we think anything that passes through our head is just a fact. It is what it is. If we thought it, then we must believe it. But over 80% of our thoughts today were thoughts that we had yesterday. And it's how marketing works. You hear something over and over and over again until you finally start to believe it. And that's exactly how our brain works. But if we know that not everything that passes through our head has to be true, then we can be the ones to change it. So an interesting thought that I like to just audit myself with sometimes, and I would love for you all to do the same thing, is think about where you want to be, what you want to do, and what are the thoughts that tell you opposite. Out of your 70,000 daily thoughts, which ones don't serve your story? What are those things getting in your way that's like a record scratch that maybe you've been telling yourself it ever since you were a kid, because our thoughts are born out of repetition, not truth. There was a study with athletes about inner dialogue, and they took one pool of basketball players, and they said, okay, I want you to give yourselves instructional self-talk. So remind yourself who to pass the ball to, what were the plays, when to shoot, you know, the mechanics of basketball. And then they took another pool of players and said, okay, I want you guys to give yourselves motivational self-talk. Remind yourself that you've trained hard, you're gonna win, you're great at basketball, and you got this. The motivational self-talk group drastically outperformed the instructional self-talk group time and time again when they ran this experiment. So what does that mean for us? It means that sometimes we need to disrupt our inner dialogue and realize that sometimes it's not as important to remind ourselves what we're doing as often as we need to remind ourselves that we're doing something great, that we're doing a good job. In the session before this, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but it was in this room, and they were talking about coping and just how you talk to yourself, and the story that you tell yourself, and the permission and the grace that you give yourself during grief and coping. It all starts with that inner dialogue and giving yourself permission to do that. But the good thing about inner dialogue is that you can actually change your thoughts. And the first step to changing your thoughts is recognizing the thoughts that need to be changed. And when you actually change your thoughts, not only are you changing your story for yourself, you're changing the story that you tell for others. And so the first step is actually figuring out what is that thought or a thought that isn't serving me anymore. So for example, I used to tell myself, like my record scratch was that I'm not good with numbers. You know, I'm really bad at math. Anytime I'd have a business meeting where I'd have to meet with financial people where there were spreadsheets involved or numbers or projections, I would freeze up. I would literally go into the room and say, this isn't my zone, I'm not good at this. And it basically announced that I was not qualified to be there. And, I started getting really tired of hearing myself say that. And it wasn't doing me any good because I wasn't engaged in these meetings. I didn't have a pulse of my own company. And one day I decided to trace it back. I was like, where did this come from? Why am I telling myself that I'm not good at math? And I thought about it, and after doing some digging, I realized the place that it was born. And it's going to sound ridiculous, but it's true, and I'm sure you all can trace back the thought to where it was born as well. Mine was in 4th grade, and I was sick the day that we learned fractions. And apparently there's like one day in 4th grade where you learn fractions and then you never learn them again. And it's like good luck for the rest of your life doing any recipes or cutting anything in half because you had one day to learn fractions and you weren't there. And so I missed the day that we learned fractions, and the next day in class, the teacher asked me to come up to the board and was like, what's 1/4 of 100? And I totally froze. I couldn't do it. And I was so embarrassed, and I just got back to my seat, and I was like, I'm not good at math. I'm not good at this. I can't do this. And from then on, I would start to sit in the back of any math class, anything to do with numbers, until this day that I finally realized that that's where it came from. And so the second step to changing your thoughts is just writing it down. Writing can do something really powerful with your brain where it actually tells you what's real and what's not, what's important and what isn't. And so when you write it down, it gives you the opportunity to look at it almost removed from your ego, as if you're a bystander looking at a piece of paper, you're the jury in the court and saying, is this true? Because when I look at, I'm not bad at math, I can flip it and say, maybe I am good at math. And then I look for evidence as to why that flipped thought is true. So whatever negative thought that you thought of when I gave you that question, flip it into the positive, and then look for actual evidence, not opinion, evidence as to why that positive thought is true. So if my positive thought is, I am good at math, well, I am running a couple multi-million-dollar companies, I pay my staff on time, you know, we are doing these huge contracts, going into retailers where we have wholesale, retail price, and it all has to work somehow, so maybe I am good at math. And then that last step to changing your inner dialogue, which ultimately helps write your story, is feeding your brain actual evidence to what you want to believe about yourself. What the speaker before this, I think her name was Heidi, she said, our brains love homework. And that's so true. For better or worse, our mind loves homework. And so what it also loves is follow through. Has anyone ever set their alarm like early in the morning to go work out? And then the alarm goes off and you're like, nope, was a different person yesterday than I am today. Like, not gonna happen. But then as you go about your day and you didn't do the thing that you thought you were gonna do, maybe you feel a little bit of a sting or a little bit of a bite in your inner dialogue. It's because you said you were gonna do something and you didn't do it. But the key here is that our brain doesn't care how big the action is, just that we complete it. And so I like to tell people who have ideas or they're on some sort of challenge or journey, like, don't worry about winning the Super Bowl, just get the first down. And so if I want to tell myself, if the person I want to be is someone who starts this headband company for kids with illnesses, then what small action can I feed my brain that tells it that it's true? That I'm not just thinking about it, I'm doing it. So that's exactly what I did. I started with the small things. So I had this idea, I was calling it Headbands of Hope. For every headband sold, I'm going to donate one to a child with an illness. And now I was a junior at NC State at the time, taking communications. I couldn't even spell entrepreneur. Still can't really spell it, I don't know why, you guys, tough word. But I decided to just look at the small things, what was within my control today. So I knew that I needed a logo. Like, yep, every business needs a logo. So I walked over to the graphic design school, went to a class that I was not enrolled in, and after the class let out, I introduced myself to the teacher, and I shook her hand, and I said, you know, I'm starting this business, and Headbands of Hope, and I was like, hey, you know, just spitballing here, but you know what would be a great idea? Is if for your next class assignment, everyone had to make me a logo, and I got to pick the best one. Doesn't that sound like a learning opportunity? And she said yes, and that was how I got my first logo for my business. And then I needed a business plan. I needed to know how am I actually going to do this? So I pulled up a directory of the business school, and any professor that was smiling in their photo, I asked them for 15 minutes of their time. And I would go in, I'm like, okay, what are taxes? And should I be concerned about them? And how do I price my product? How do I do any of these things? So little by little, I started to get my business questions answered. And then I needed a website. And so I posted something on a forum at the computer design school, and someone emailed me back that they would meet with me and teach me Photoshop and Shopify. So I met with her for a week for her to teach me how to build my website, and I paid her in Chipotle burritos. And that was how I built my website. I now call it Burrito Strapping My Business. It was a real thing. So little by little, things started to come together for Headbands of Hope, not by focusing on the Super Bowl, but just by trying to get the first down. And not even some days the first down, just a 1-yard gain. It's just how can I just keep moving the ball down the field and look at what's within my control today? What's the next right thing that I can do? So the next right thing that I had to do was I had to find someone to actually make the headbands. I had to have an actual product. Small detail, I'll figure it out. So I found this website, I think it was called like Seams.org. And it was this database of thousands of US manufacturers. And so I started going down the list, and any manufacturer in their bio that said that they manufactured elastic, it was like, then they could probably make the headband. That was my quality control that I was doing. And so I just started reaching out to all of these manufacturers. In hindsight, I laugh at it now because I was coming at them from like a .edu email address with like probably Comic Sans font or something super embarrassing. But just hoping that someone would read it and just take a chance on me, you know, and just believe that maybe I could be something. 2 months of radio silence. None of these manufacturers would get back to me. And I would even take a no at this point, just to recognize that my existence. And so 2 months of radio silence, no one got back to me. Finally, this factory in Kansas emailed me back, and they wanted to get on a call. I was like, this is great, my first business meeting, like, let's do this. So I get on a call with them, tell them about my idea, what I want to create. They're like, this is awesome, we want to partner with you on this, we'll walk you through it. Perfect. So for about 2 more months, I'm going back and forth with this company, and this manufacturer, and they will send me pictures of different headbands that they could create. I have different feedback, and finally one day they sent me a headband, and I was like, you know, let's do it. Let's make this headband. So they sent me over an invoice to start production, and it was for $10,000. I was like, I probably should have asked this before. But if I'm telling you all the real pancake story, it was that I knew that I was gonna have to obviously pay for the headbands, but I was so in my head about this hierarchy that I had created. Like I thought anyone who was working with me, who took my calls, was doing me a favor, you know, and that I couldn't push them, I couldn't ask questions, I shouldn't ruffle any feathers, because I should just be grateful, you know, that they're working with me. Which now I know is just a story that I was telling myself that wasn't serving me. But at the time, you know, I had created this hierarchy in my head that wasn't even true. And so, nevertheless, I was in a bit of a pickle because $10,000 was about $9,500 more than what I had in my bank account at the time. I was still on a, you know, college student, ramen noodles, using my sister's Netflix password budget. Still use her Netflix password, don't tell her. So I literally Googled, I remember typing into Google, how do I get $10,000 for my business? And 2 different ways came up. It was like, one, you could try to apply for a loan from the bank and, you know, pay interest on it. 2, you could try to find an investor to give you that money and then give away equity of your business. And so this was around Thanksgiving break, and I was going home, and my dad is also an entrepreneur, so I was like, I'm gonna ask for his advice. And I was like, should I try to get a loan, even though I didn't even have a credit card at the time? Or should I try to find an investor to give me this money and I can give away equity? And he was like, look, one of the mistakes I made when I started my business was I gave away too much equity too early. And I don't want you to have to do the same thing. I've actually looked at your business plan, checked out your website, looked at your projections, and I think this is a really good idea. So I want to be your first investor. I will front you the $10,000 to start production, and we'll work out a payment plan that you can pay me back as the business starts to return a profit. And this was like hearing my dog speak English. I mean, I was so shocked, thrilled, and I recognized the immense privilege. I mean, financially, emotionally, to have a family that let me leap. So many people start businesses and do amazing things that didn't have that safety net. And so I shook his hand. I said, you got yourself a deal. I ran to the bank. It was a Friday afternoon, I remember this, because I wanted them to get the money before the weekend because I was a businesswoman. I walked in, wired them $10,000, and I never heard from them again. You saw that coming, didn't you? You were like, yup. I sniffed that one out. I wish you could have told me that earlier. Yeah. I felt like maybe this is a sign, you know? Like maybe this is the universe telling me that I'm not qualified, that I shouldn't be doing this. And I should just sweep this under the rug, start applying for jobs like all my friends, and start to pay my dad back. And if you've ever wanted something, you know, you wanted to do something, it's like you almost plug it into this internal GPS that we have in our heads. And it's like, well, this is where you want to go, this is what you want to do. Well, these are the steps that you take. You know, this is how you get there. And this is the way that it's always been done. So you start marching down that way, following your GPS directions, turn left, turn right, here's the speed limit, and then all of a sudden, there's a road closure, or there's a mudslide, or there's, you know, a cute family of turtles crossing the street, and that way that you've been told is the way doesn't work. And when you're told it's the way, and it doesn't work, then you just have reason to believe that the whole thing isn't going to work. But there will always be this other way to get to where you want to go if it means something more. If it's more to your story. You know, we can't control our experience, but maybe there's a part to that story that we can redirect. No one would sign Jay-Z when he first started putting his music out there. So he created his own record label and then signed himself. Probably not the most direct way to get your music out there, but it was a way, and I'm safe to say I think it paid off. But I remember after all of this was going down, we ended up going to court and trying to get the money back, and by that point we were spending more money in legal fees and we had to cut our losses. I mean, they got shut down, but still, it was a doozy. And you know, a month or so after this happened, I remember going to bed one night, and if you're like me, you close your eyes, you're ready to go to sleep, and you're like, now would be a great time to run through my biggest life's mistakes. Like, let me just get a low light reel of everything that I wish I'd done differently. And so I was closing my eyes and thinking about this, and I just couldn't sleep, and it was, I realized that like, this isn't about the embarrassment of failure. Like, I feel like I could stomach being embarrassed after failing or after messing up. But have you ever had an itch in between your shoulder blades that you can't scratch and it absolutely drives you nuts? That was the feeling that I had. It was an itch that I couldn't scratch. And this itch, did I just make you scratch something? A lot of people start doing that after I say itch and scratch. This itch was kids not feeling good about themselves after losing their hair to chemotherapy. Like, that was the problem. My scratch was providing headbands to boost their confidence. That was my solution. And so sometimes when we want something and we want it bad enough, it's like an itch that needs to be scratched where you really can't help but advocate and do something about it, which I'm sure every one of you have felt before. And so the next day I got up and I went to the School of Entrepreneurship at NC State. They were giving away $300 grants to students who were starting businesses. And I was like, you know, even though I lost $10,000, I was like, $300, I'll take it. Like, Yahtzee, let's do it. So I got $300. I went on to Etsy and I found a headband maker in Bismarck, North Dakota. And she let me buy like really low minimums of headbands to get started for like $300. I put 2 different types of headbands up on my website, April 25th, 2012. I remember I hit launch, and within like 45 minutes, my first order came through from my mom. It was like 4 hours later, my second order came through from my grandpa after he called me to figure out how to work the website. But since then, a little over 10 years ago, which is crazy, I've been in Vanity Fair, People, Good Morning America, The Today Show. We're in about 2,000 retailers right now. We actually roll out in all Kohl's locations next month, which I'm really excited about. And we're the official headband provider for the NBA and the WNBA. We've had some celebrities wear our headbands, like Zooey Deschanel, even the Kardashians, which that's either good news or bad news, depending where you are on the Kardashian spectrum. But my favorite thing is what we've been able to do as a result of that. We started to host these DIY headband days at hospitals in partnership with Sharpie, where kids can actually design and create their own headbands that they can wear. We started to host proms at children's hospitals. We actually hosted one at Duke a few years ago. And we've officially donated headbands to every single children's hospital in America in 22 countries, over 1 million headbands donated. And this is the best part. Actually, can I get a drum roll for this? Can you guys help me out? I paid my dad back. I was like, I wrote him a check one day for $10,001. I was like, here's some interest. Pleasure doing business with you, sir. Let's do it again soon. He didn't. But after this happened, for years, I felt like this failure, this blip was like a scarlet letter, you know, that I couldn't let people know, you know, that I messed up so bad. But then as I started to meet other people, like, who have done something that they're proud of, every single one of them had a $10,000 story. Some with a lot more zeros than mine. And so when I was writing Chasing the Bright Side, you know, trying to figure out what keeps people going, you know, what keeps people optimistic when times are tough, I used to think that success meant the absence of bumps. You know, the people who are successful are the ones who never, you know, hit a pothole or never like had any kind of speed bump in their life. That those were the ones who were successful, who got out a straight shot. But now I realize that success isn't the absence of bumps, it's the navigation of them. It's the people who drive off into the ditch and can autocorrect, you know, without having to call AAA. Or it's the people that, you know, get knocked down, who know that they can ask for help to get back on track. And so when I have interviewed, you know, hundreds of entrepreneurs, Olympic athletes, musicians, they all had a $10,000 story. But it was an itch too much that they had to be able to scratch it. They cared too much that they had to do something about it. For example, my friend Laura, she studied abroad in college. In the country that she studied abroad in, it was really normal, a part of their diet to eat bugs. Has anyone here ever eaten a bug on purpose? Yeah? What'd you guys eat?
Mealworms.
Wow, mealworms. What about you? Caterpillar. That's the first time I've heard that. That would be kind of juicy. Anyone else eat bug? What'd you eat?
Mealworms.
Mealworms. Wow, I gotta try those. They seem to be popular. So she was like, we should be eating bugs in America. They're a good source of protein. They're good for the environment. Like, let's eat more bugs. So she created a chip made of ground cricket powder, called them chirps. They're actually really good. Barbecue flavor is my favorite. And she needed money to get her idea started. And so she got connected with this environmental investor. And she's like, this is perfect. He cares about the environment. I care about the environment. This is a match made in heaven. So she goes in. She gives her pitch, wearing her bug costume. And at the end of the pitch, she holds out a silver platter of chirps. And she goes, "Bug appetit." And he looked at her and he said, "Laura, I've been an investor for 15 years. And this is by far the worst idea I've ever heard in my life." Laura went on a few months later to go on Shark Tank, got a deal with Mark Cuban, and now her chirps are sold in all Disney World parks. So, eat that, am I right? Then the founders of Ben & Jerry, I'll let you take a wild guess on what their names are, but they met in college. They decided to take this $5 ice cream making course on a whim together. Jerry was trying to get into med school, so he really understood like the chemistry of ice cream. Ben was trying to be a potter, and it wasn't really working out. He wasn't able to sell his stuff. So they're like, let's just open up our own shop together, and let's do it so you can actually see the ingredients in the ice cream, like see the cookie dough, see the brownie. So they renovated this abandoned gas station in Vermont, opened up the first ever Ben & Jerry's location. And of course, people loved it. You know, they were selling so much ice cream. One day they had a line out the door, and they were scooping ice cream, they're sweating. They look at each other and they're like, man, we're selling a ton of ice cream, but we're not making any money. So they closed their doors and they put that yellow sign on it. And it said, direct quote, "We're closed because we have no idea what we're doing." Ben & Jerry's. I think they figured it out. And then I'm going to tell you about my dear, dear friend, Will Ferrell. I'm just going to let that sit for one more second. Okay, we're not actually good friends. I saw him at a football game and I chased him down and I was like, did we just become best friends? Anyone know what movie? Step Brothers? Yes, thank you. One person got it and he pretended to laugh, just like some of you did. But Will has an interesting story. I call him Will. Even after he made it on Saturday Night Live, which of course is like the mecca of comedy, it took him 3 years to shop around Anchorman before anyone would even read the script. But he said, but my fear of failure never approached in magnitude my fear of what if. What if I never tried at all? If there's one thing I can be so sure of over the past 10 years, starting Headbands of Hope and all of the ups and downs from it, it is that failure will always feel better than regret. You know, some days would host a pop-up that no one would come to, or I would, you know, try something that wouldn't move the needle. And maybe you can relate to that when you're trying to advocate for something you believe in. Sometimes you're like, is this mic on? You know, is anyone hearing me? But failure will always feel better than regret. In fact, at Headbands of Hope, we no longer call it failure. We call it research. Because that's exactly what it is. At the end of the day, we now, once we do something and we engage with the world, we have more information than we did before. We had more information than if we hadn't tried. There was this trade show in Atlanta where stores from around the world come in and they pick their products from different brands. So you can go there as a brand and hope that, you know, a store will come and pick up your product. And so I was there. It was one of the first times I ever went. I had like drained my bank account in order to go to this show in Atlanta. And I got there and my booth location was like behind the bathroom. Like I couldn't even find where my booth was. I was like, how is anyone gonna be able to find this? And it was like on day 2 of a 3-day show, and I hadn't written a single order. I had barely even talked to anyone. And I was like, I was just thinking, like, how am I gonna pay for this? You know, and am I gonna go from here? And I was looking around, and I saw this woman coming down the escalator, and you know, they all had name tags, kind of like the ones you're wearing on lanyards. They had their name and the store that they represented, the store that they were buying for. And I looked at her name tag, and it said Ulta Makeup Stores. And I had this moment where I was like, I wanted to go for it, because I knew she wasn't going to come back here. So it was like, I wanted to just run after her and tell her about Headbands of Hope, because I was like, Ulta would be perfect. But I was like, but what if she says no, you know? So I ran the analysis in my head. I'm like, what if she says no? Then I'll be standing right here behind the bathrooms, just like I was before. So I went for it, and I started running, chased her down a flight of stairs, finally got in front of her, and I was like, hi, my name is Jess, and I just launched into my elevator pitch. I totally blacked out, I don't even know what I said, but I remember at one point, I knelt down and literally gifted her the headband off of my head, and I was like, I want you to have this. And I walked away. Yeah, I remember she was just like nice, but not interested. And I gave her my card and all my information, and I came back to my booth, you know, headbandless. And even though I didn't get the reaction that I wanted, I felt assured because I wasn't wondering, well, what would have happened if I had done that. But then 4 years later, after that trade show, we launched in all 1,000 Ulta locations. 4 years later. And so sometimes when I have those moments where like I want to go after something and I want to do something about it, but I'm afraid of what someone might say, or I'm afraid it might not work out, I think about that story. And I think about even the $10,000 story and some of these moments where, like, if you had turned left or right, if you had decided to give up or not gone for it, then everything that happened after it wouldn't exist. You know, we have this, we call it a smile file at Headbands of Hope, and it's like all the patients and people that we've gotten photos or letters from that we've helped, and I'm sure LCI has something similar. And you know, anytime that something's hard, we look at our smile file, and I just think sometimes that these moments, these speed bumps, if they had let me, if it had been the reason that I'd given up, then this smile file wouldn't have even existed. But I think when someone says, like, well, if you just love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life, it's kind of a load of crap, if I'm being honest. Because we can love what we do, we can care about it so much, but at the end of the day, we still have to raise money, we still have to show up, we still have to sometimes do things that we don't want to do. So how do we change that? Like, how do we draw a deeper connection? So I want you to take, like, maybe your assigned work, or even what you do here at LCI, or maybe, you know, maybe it's handing out flyers, maybe it's hosting events, maybe it's, you know, trying to gather donations, all these tangible tasks. But meaningful work are the things that we do because it's driven by some deeper purpose. So I'll give you an example. There was a study at Yale, and they interviewed hospital custodians. And they took one pool of people that were super unhappy in their jobs. And they said, okay, well, what do you do every day? And they said, well, I take out the trash, I sanitize the equipment. Okay, well, why do you do it? I need benefits, I need a salary to support my job, or support my family. And then they asked what their job titles were. One person said janitor, another person said maintenance worker. And then they asked another pool of people who had the exact same assigned work, same things that they did every day. But they loved their job. They couldn't wait to get to work every day. They said, well, okay, well, what is it that you do? And one person said that she worked in hospice care, and she would take it upon herself to shuffle the artwork from room to room each week so that her patients would have something different to look at. Another person had a notepad that he would clip onto his belt, and he would tally which rooms got visitors that day, circle the ones that didn't, so he could make it a point to spend more time in the rooms that didn't get any visitors that day. Another person said that he took it upon himself to educate himself about the different chemicals used in their cleaning supplies, so he could make sure to not use any cleaning product that would irritate any of his patients. When asked what their job titles were, one person described himself as an ambassador for the hospital, and another person described herself as a healer. All of these people had the exact same assigned work, same tasks, same thing that they did every day, but the people who were truly fulfilled chose not to look at their job as a job, but as a service to humanity. And our story can be that service. How we see ourselves and how we tell others about it can be the biggest service that we can ever make. There was a study at UC Berkeley, and this science professor had his students write I am statements. I am blank. Just write as many as you can. He told one half of the class to sit out in the hallway and write their I am statements, just looking at a wall. He told the other half of the class, go over to the Life and Sciences building and write your I am statements in the lobby. And the lobby had a huge T-Rex skeleton that they would look at. The class that did it in the lobby, looking at the skeleton, wrote much bigger and grander I am statements than the students who were sitting in the hallway. And so what we can take from that is, how do we remind ourselves that we're part of something much bigger? Like, even just sitting here today and already hearing some of your stories as a caregiver or as a survivor, you're part of something so big and so grand that I'm sure sometimes it can be a lot to take in and a lot of pressure. But when you can self-identify as a part of something bigger, when you can see the T-Rex in front of you, then you can actually serve more people behind it. Because at the end of the day, maybe it doesn't have to be a job, but it can be a service to others through our story. So before I end, I have one more story, and I see some of you taking pictures and notes, which is awesome. I should have said this in the beginning. I'm happy to send you this presentation too. So you can text me the word recap to that number on the screen, or you can scan the QR code and it'll do the same thing, because if there's anything that's made a comeback during the pandemic, it's QR codes. So I'm happy to send you these notes. But this last story is one that's, a little bit harder to tell, but I think when I started Headbands of Hope, and maybe like the first time you decided you wanted to advocate, for lung cancer, you have that day one energy. It's, you know why you're doing it. You either were personally affected or someone you love, and it's so clear. But then sometimes as you get deeper and deeper into something, it just, what you're doing and why you're doing it can sometimes become blurry. And that's exactly what was happening to me. 5 years into Headbands of Hope, it was all of a sudden I had, payroll of employees. I had contracts that were getting bigger. I had warehouse rent, that I needed to keep the lights on. And that the layers in between what I was doing and why I was doing it just became larger. And it wasn't so direct anymore. And there was a trade show, just like I was telling you about, the one with Ulta. And I was supposed to go to Atlanta in about a week, and I was at UNC, North Carolina Children's Hospital right here, and I met this girl named Taylor. And she's 15, and she picked out this awesome purple and green headband. She even had a little bit of hair left on the top of her head, so we dyed it into a mohawk to match her headband, which I thought was awesome. And she was telling me when I was there that she was feeling kind of down because she was on social media and she was seeing her friends get asked out to prom, and her friends going prom dress shopping with their parents, and prom wasn't going to be in the works for her. She wasn't going to be able to go to prom that year. And I was like, look, I have to go to Atlanta next week, but when I get back, let's have our own prom. I'll come back here, we'll get dressed up, put on makeup, we'll take pictures, we'll invite other kids on the hall, let's do it. So she was super excited. She added me on Facebook Messenger, and she started putting together like a Spotify playlist of what we were gonna listen to. And then I was in Atlanta, and it was move-in time. And I had ordered these tags to go along with the headbands, these hang tags, and they were lost in the mail. And I remember thinking, like, this is the worst thing that could ever happen, these tags being lost. And how is any store here gonna take us seriously if we don't have tags on our products? And I was going up the escalator and I was on the phone with this tag company trying to get these rerouted to Atlanta. And if you've ever had a moment that was so powerful to you, when you think of it, all of your senses come back. I remember standing there at the top of this escalator and on the phone with this tag company and hearing the carts going by and people moving into their booths and getting call waiting from an unknown number. And I remember thinking to myself, who could be calling me at a time like this? Thinking it was a sales call or spam. Switch over the line, I was like, hello? And it was Taylor's mom. And she was calling to tell me that Taylor had passed the night before. And that she wanted those same purple and green headbands that you see right there for every woman in her family to wear to her service the next day. Because that's how much she loved her headband. And I just remember it was like I had been moving in fast forward and someone hit the pause button for me. And it was like I felt the weight of this anchor kind of pull me back down, feel my feet touch the ground, and I didn't even realize how far I had been floating. Because here was my narrative. Like, I would tell myself, well, once I can get on a big network television show, then I'll know that I've made it. Or once I can get on the cover of a magazine. Or once I can get in a national retailer. Or once I can do, have a whole team of people that work for me. Once I can do $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 million in sales. Once I can give a TED Talk. Once I can get a book deal. And I was setting my calendar to feel something. And then all those things happened. Every single one of them. And they would just come and go. And that's when I started to think, what is wrong with me? Because after these things would happen, I would almost feel worse because I thought I was going to feel better. And it was Taylor that taught me that achievements are these tangible milestones, in our life. Maybe, we get an award. Maybe we get a pat on the back. Maybe we get a promotion. Maybe we make or raise a certain amount of money, and all of that is wonderful. And achievements deserve to be celebrated. But achievements are not our final destination. Success is something that can't be measured. It can only be felt. And so achievements give us the appearance of winning, but success gives us this feeling of legacy. And our stories, the ones that you tell, are the ones that are going to be your legacy. I used to think that how far could I reach? How many sales can I make? How many stages can I speak on? How many books can I write? And I was thinking of my life in terms of my race. But when we realize that our life is not our race, it's a relay that we participate in. And we're all holding a baton. And maybe we can just try to make as much progress for causes that we care about till when we have to pass the baton to someone else. I used to think fulfillment was a destination, that we would hit one day. But I now realize that fulfillment is actually a choice to how we live our life today. And our stories can be someone else's survival guide to finding their own fulfillment, to finding their own path. But it can get hard when we're constantly measuring ourselves to failures or to other people. So we have to remember that success is not what it looks like to others. It's only what it feels like to you. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.